Grace,
Yeah.
one of the problems that we've noticed over the years, obviously, I always say that, I love my fellow countrymen, but we're a very ignorant nation, unfortunately. And when it comes to the opinions of Brexit and what they understood, what they didn't understand, I understand why Brexit happened, and I think there was validity to it. But we only seem to get extremes in the political arena. Yes, the EU is corrupt, but so is Vulture Capitalism, which is exactly who wanted Brexit in the first place.
Right.
So where is the balance, and how do we find it?
Yeah, and this really comes down to people's attitudes towards democracy, right? We had this study come out the other day in the UK that showed the public trust in political parties was at its lowest level ever. And that's really not surprising because we have a similar system to you guys here in the UK, this kind of, majoritarian electoral system. There's only two major political parties and they, they present the electorate with two different versions of the same sets of policies. And every time you get a candidate coming up through the ranks of particularly the center left parties that's agitating for change, they're crushed by the media, by the, political institutions, by the party itself, right? And so people are presented with these two sets of basically completely hugely similar list of policies at an election at the same time as politicians are out there saying, vote for me to get real change. So, either they're looking at these people and saying, well, you're just the same as each other, I'm not going to bother voting. Or they vote for the candidate that promises change. They get into office. They don't deliver change because, these people are in the pockets of big businesses, of lobbyists, whatever. And those are the people who are running the show. And, you vote and you turn out and you engage with politics. You try and you invest hope. You invest a sense of yourself in the idea that turning up on election day could make a difference, and then it doesn't, and that really grinds people down over time. It's where people get this idea of politicians are all the same, there's no point turning out to vote, which has some validity in some cases because it's not often going to deliver you real change if that's all you're doing, if you're focusing all your politics on voting. But also it starts to feed into this really dangerous conspiracy theory mindset that we see a lot on the far right now, which is they're all in it together, the whole system is corrupt, which to an extent is true. There is a huge amount of corruption at the very core of our economy, but the far right response to that is just to say the people at the top have loads of power, and often there's this kind of conspiracy theory thing of they control everything, they pull all the strings. That means we have no power, so we're going to vote for someone who just wants to watch the whole system burn, who just wants to bring it all down, just deliver a revenge to the people who have screwed us over. And that is, I think, what's fueling the rise of the far right. It's this sense of powerlessness combined with a real anger at being lied to. And I think the only response to that, because, you can't come back to people and say, oh, actually, no, the system works, just go out and vote, everything's going to be fine, because that's not true.
We're past the point.
We're way past that, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The only way I think you can respond to that is by saying, yes, the system is screwed, but the part you've got wrong there is the idea that you're powerless, because you're not powerless. And in fact, the only way that the system functions is if you continue to believe that you are powerless. Because if you believe you're powerless, you don't turn up and join a union and organize at work to get higher wages and better conditions. If you think you're powerless, you don't organize in your community to, make sure that your public services work for you, to make sure that your local government is actually engaging with the issues that are affecting your community. If you think you're powerless, you don't turn up on the streets and actually protest when your government does things that are against your interests. Whereas if you are able to get that sense of, the sense of power that you get when you organize with other people, not just as an individual, but that collective power and that collective agency that comes from organizing, then you can say, right, the system is fucked, but we can change it if we work together.
That is such an improper way to speak.
Oh, don't.
Sorry. We're much more loose with our language over here, I think.
Yeah,
I love it.
My background is Irish, but of course no one wants to hear mine.
Of course. Well, you know that very well then.
Absolutely.
Because when he does it, he sounds like the guy from the Lucky Charms commercial. You're delicious. That's because you sound ridiculous.
I just want to say one thing. Just one thing to the Brits.
Oh my God!
You're more than accepted in our country.
Oh, Grace, I'm mortified.
So just keep in mind.
I love the Irish. I'm not going to lie. They are much more radical and hardcore than we are.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Well, speaking of the Irish, and obviously we have to talk about
I have to just say, yesterday I got compared to Claire Daly, and I almost cried. And I almost cried because I was like getting all like angry about something, and I'm like, yeah. And I say I love that feisty Irish woman.
Badass. Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk about the feistiest politician representative in the UK right now. Obviously, it's George Galloway. His victory was very substantial the other day.
He's hilarious.
And he is a guy who really has zero F's to give.
Zero.
So
like,
I'd like to talk about two things. One, the impact of his win, considering it looks like all of British Parliament tried to make sure he didn't win re-election, and it didn't work. And then we're fine.
We're fine.
And then obviously transition that into the UK's, or I'm guessing it's probably upper crust society that's more obsessed with the whole with supporting Israel, and how that's translated in your country, comparatively speaking, to the way things are right
Did he win
here.
on that issue?
Yeah, totally. I mean, look, we've got to get one thing clear. George Galloway is an opportunist. Like, his political career is based on finding an issue that is going to, really anger part of the electorate, and then building a whole campaign around it, building a personality around it. He is, he's not someone that I would trust to represent me over the long term. Definitely not. But I think his victory shows something very, very clear, which is that people are angry. They are really, really angry.
Exactly.
And this happens all the time. This happened with Brexit, right? The people at the top of our society have no idea about the deep-seated anger that exists, particularly in certain communities, but just among the working class in general. They kind of pat each other on the back and look at their polling data and what all their mates in the media are saying, and they just think, oh well, the Labour Party is going to win. It's going to be a landslide, and it doesn't really matter what Labour does. So let's make sure that the party is kind of doing its bit to please its backers among big business, and to make sure that the British foreign policy has for many, many years now just been to follow whatever the US does. And so Starmer, it's ridiculous. Yeah, and Starmer just wants to around. Yeah, well, yeah, quite.
The fact that you seem to be aspiring over there, and I see someone in Doug put that up about that. It's like they're aspiring to be more like us, and the idea that that you now are looking at the privatization of your healthcare and having to deal with that it's amazing to me, because it so fails miserably for the majority of people. And so it only works for a very small number of people that profit from it, and everyone else is screwed. And I can't understand for the life of me how a place that has healthcare would ever let it go. Yep. We don't have it. So and that's always their fear, is that if they even gave it for an emergency, then people would never let them have it back.
But I have a feeling that they're not voluntarily giving this up. I think that this is much like, I have a feeling that British Parliament, while it may be better on the periphery compared to the US government, at the same time, I'm willing to bet that they conduct business probably very similar to us, which is the people who are in positions of power do not represent the people at all.
Yes.
And they're in bed with whatever corporations or profit motives that are there. But it's like, now that your people see what a crappy train wreck we are with that, you guys need to mobilize and not let it happen. It's almost like we never had it, but to lose it would be like, I don't know. You can't let that happen. You do not want to fall down our debt spiral. We have bankruptcy. Half of our bankruptcies are for healthcare. You don't want this.
And half your bankruptcies are for healthcare. And I think the leading cause of suicide for men under 40 is bankruptcy related to
economic anxiety. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's horrific. And you kind of hit the nail on the head there. And this is what I actually write about in the book, Vulture Capitalism, which looks at, I didn't want to kind of come at this from a kind of conspiracy theory perspective of the government just does what the evil bankers tell it to do. I wanted to really analyze how the cooperation between the public and private sectors works. And it's very deeply ingrained. And I think, I come at it from a socialist perspective, and there's a long history of analyzing the way that capitalist states work. And basically the analysis is that what happens within the state reflects the balance of power between the classes in society as a whole. So the NHS was created in the post-war period, along with, you know, big investment in social housing, public services, education, etc. Why did that happen? Because the working class was strong, because it was organized, because it was capable of taking strike action, because it was capable of getting its interests heard within the state, of electing representatives, of basically scaring the ruling class into giving it a portion of what it wanted, right? What shifted in the 1980s, of course, and you had the same sort of thing with Reagan as we had with Thatcher, was there was this all-out war against the labor movement. So, you know, the physical violence that was used against workers, combined with legislation, privatization, you know, all of these mechanisms that were designed to really punish the working classes, that gave us a social shift, really, a big power shift in favor of capital. And as that happened, you started to see policies in, you know, state policy come to favor the ruling class much more. And you see this with healthcare now. You know, there's that famous Chomsky quote, which is like the best way to privatize something is to defund it, so people think it doesn't work. They stop using it. The middle classes stop using it. They go use private services, and then only the poor use it, so it's easy to privatize. And that's kind of, I think, what the plan is in this country, because we have this discourse around austerity, as I've mentioned, which is that, like, you know, the government's maxed out its credit card. We can't afford to borrow any more money to fund public services, which is, of course, absurd. That's not how public spending works. It's not how, you know, it's not how the bond market works. It's not how public services works. It's not how anything works, but it's a powerful metaphor. And that's been used to convince people that if the government does spend more money investing in healthcare to support people so that they can live long, healthy lives and work and pay taxes, that is somehow bad for the economy.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.